Hello and welcome to Global News Today. I'm Michael Prendergast, and coming up in today's show, I'll be joined by Ambassador John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor to President Trump, with updates on the wars in Ukraine and Gaza and hopes for a ceasefire. After which, a quick-fire roundup of the biggest stories in the US political scene, including fallout from the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk. Joining me first is Ambassador John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor to President Trump, to discuss the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the Arab-Islamic summit in Doha, and the war in Ukraine. I'd just like to start off, Ambassador Bolton, by asking you, what's your reaction to the callous murder of Charlie Kirk?
Well, it's a terrible tragedy. It's for his family, obviously, but it's a stark reminder to the country as a whole that violence of any kind in a civil political society is unacceptable. And it applies, whatever it is the speaker's saying, whether it's from the right or the left or whatever perspective you want to have, it's just not acceptable. We have a very highly partisan political environment now, and people need to remember that we should be arguing about ideas and policies and not about personalities. That's the way to get things calmed down and hopefully have a smoother, better civil discourse, which we definitely need.
Did you ever meet Charlie Kirk?
I never did, and it's evident that his death has touched a lot of people. So. It's a tragic moment, but if people can learn appropriate lessons, maybe it could lead to a better future.
Within 72 hours of taking office, President Trump, he removed your security detail along with that of Mike Pompeo. Is your own personal safety a concern?
Well, necessarily, given that the reason that Pompeo and I and several others, former Secretary of Defense Esper, former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Milley, had security protection, even though we were no longer federal officials, was the threat from Iran. And that threat remains. Conceivably, it's worse today after the attack on Iran's nuclear weapons program. And the regime is dangerous enough that I think people should be concerned about it. We can see this pattern from Tehran and terrorist attacks all over Europe against members of the Iranian diaspora in the U.S. as well. So this is a terrorist regime. There's no doubt about it.
Is the Arab-Islamic summit in Doha, is it a diplomatic threat to Israel, or is it just more rhetoric?
Well, I think this is an opportunity for people to assess really the state of play in the Middle East and to remember ultimately what the real threats are. And the real threat remains the regime in Iran and its desire for hegemony in the region, politically and militarily, and its desire for hegemony within Islam. As I say, it's a terrorist regime. It has established terrorist proxy groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and it's engaged right now in a war with Israel that obviously just touched Doha a few days ago. So I understand the level of criticism of Israel, and I think you heard it from President Trump as well. The question is how to keep things on track for what I think responsible parties want, which is peace and security in the Middle East on a permanent basis. And we shouldn't let the events of the day, as much as they might attract our attention, distract us from strategically understanding where the real threats are. And they come from Iran, basically.
And at this summit, how seriously should the US take calls from Iran and others to sever all ties with Israel?
You know, that was tried ever since Israeli independence in 1948, and it didn't work. It didn't work. The breakthroughs that have been achieved in the past several years to get diplomatic relations and peace between Israel and its neighbors are evidence of not just of political progress, but of real change in the region as a whole. where I think in the Gulf Arab countries in particular, the view was essentially the same as Israel's, that the greatest threat to their peace and security came from Iran. That's what led to the Abraham Accords. That hasn't changed. If anything has changed in the region, it's that Iran and its proxies have now been weakened by the war they launched by the Hamas attack in October of 2023. Weakened but not yet defeated. And I think considering what the change calculus of and the correlation of forces today is in the region says that we're all closer to achieving the objective of a sustainable peace, but we can't leave the rest of what needs to be done undone. Otherwise, in a short period of time, we could be right back into where we were on October 7th, which isn't helpful to anybody except the terrorists.
Does Israel strike on Qatar? Does it risk triggering a broader regional escalation? And how should the US respond?
Well, I think the risk is because obviously nobody in Qatar likes having violence occur in their capital city, of being carried away with the emotions of the moment and not seeing the longer term implications. I think there needs to be some consultation between Qatar and Israel. I'm sure it will be at first a very unpleasant meeting, and that's to be expected. But as my former boss, Secretary of State Jim Baker, used to tell me all the time, keep your eyes on the prize. And the prize here is not venting anger as justifiable as you may think it to be. The prize is dealing with the real threats to peace and security in the region, which stem from the revolution in Tehran.
Netanyahu hasn't ruled out further strikes on Hamas leaders after the Qatari attack, saying that they won't have immunity wherever they are. With the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, he's now in Jerusalem. Can the US rein him in?
Well, I think that's what Rubio is probably telling Netanyahu, don't do it again, or at least don't do it again unless you give us the chance first to say we don't think it's a good idea. I have to tell you, thinking back to how the United States felt right after 9/11, if we had found Osama bin Laden in a conference room in some fancy hotel somewhere around the world, even if it was one of our allies, I'm not sure we would have stopped and let him get away. I'm not sure we wouldn't have gone ahead and tried to take him out in that conference room in that fancy hotel. I don't know. We didn't face that situation. But when you've been attacked by terrorists the way the U.S. was, the way Israel was, I think one can understand the perspective, even if the particular decision involved that people are worried about today may have been ill-advised. I think you can understand the logic behind the strike.
Turning to the war in Ukraine now, Russia has violated NATO airspace twice in 1 week. There's been drones in Poland, there's been drones in Romania. How should Europe respond?
Well, I think this is a question for NATO, not just the Europeans. I think it's just not credible to say, as Moscow has said, that these were accidents, the drones were off course. I think Putin has felt he has a free hand in Ukraine ever since the Alaska summit, unfortunately. I think these two drone incursions that you mentioned are tests, provocations. The Russians want to see how NATO reacts. And so far, the reaction has been rhetorical, which diplomats are good at. I think it needs to be much stronger, not just in economic terms, which Trump has suggested, but I think we need to take urgent steps to reestablish deterrence so that the Russians don't do this again. If you're living in Poland or the Baltic republics or anywhere near the Russian border, you're worried about what you see in Ukraine and now what we've seen in two NATO countries. So failing to take a very hard response here, I think just risks further provocations.
We're 3 years into the war in Ukraine. Is there an end in sight?
Well, I don't think so, unfortunately. Remember, Russia's objective here is to recreate the Russian Empire. Putin has said that repeatedly for the past 20 years. and they take a long-term view of it. They got 10% of Ukraine in 2014. They've got another 10% of it now, at an enormous human cost to Russia, to be sure. But their objective is long-term, and even if we were to get a ceasefire tomorrow, it would simply give the Russians an opportunity to regroup, to refit their army, and to consider how to go after Ukraine again. So this is something that I'm afraid was not handled well by NATO in the immediate aftermath of the Russian invasion in 2022. That's one reason why there's near gridlock on the battlefield today. But I don't think you can ever let this kind of unprovoked aggression go unanswered, because it's a matter not just in Ukraine. It sets a precedent in the Middle East. It sets a precedent for China along its Indo-Pacific periphery. There's a lot at stake here.
Ambassador John Bolton, thanks so much for your time.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for your time, Angie. You've met Charlie Kirk. You've heard him speak at many turning point events in the USA. What kind of first impression did he make on you?
Yeah, Charlie Kirk was a very good man. He was one of the good boys. He was always very, very helpful. He always took the time out, if he could, to speak to everybody. And that's what was so wonderful about Charlie Kirk. He wanted to hear from you. He wanted a live debate, an open debate. He didn't care what spectrum you were on in the political circus. He wanted to speak with you, mainly to change your mind, but he loved talking to people. Charlie Kirk's death is really a mirror into what is happening in U.S. politics right now. Instead of a universal outrage, we had a lot of people celebrating his death and murder online over the past few days. And it's been, to me, an outrageous thing to do when anyone dies. But that's what's happening. People were cheering on his murder as if it were a sports team winning. And I think it's a very, very dark moment for U.S. history.
J.D. Vance is hosting an episode of Charlie Kirk's show tonight. Does this show the level of power and influence that Charlie Kirk held?
Yes, and Charlie Kirk gave a platform to young students when for many, many years the conservative movement and the conservative voice was canceled here in the United States. Social media took down a lot of social media influencers on the conservative side, and Charlie Kirk made it okay to be a conservative, especially in youth in America. And that's why he was such a big threat, is because he really resonated with young Americans. And that's why TPUSA will live on beyond Charlie Kirk. And I think that's what J.D. Vance is trying to do today, to say this doesn't die with one man. This movement continues. And it's so brave for the vice president to take over his show, at least for one night, because it does show a growing audience, not just in the U.S., but now we're seeing it in the U.K., we're seeing it in South Korea, we're seeing it in Germany. So TPUSA in the last week has grown multiple folds. It just says that we cannot be silenced.
And as you stated earlier, we've seen a plethora of people from every walk of life, from doctors, from nurses and pilots, who've lost their jobs for going onto social media and celebrating the brutal assassination of Charlie Kirk. This is surely a stark example of how far the left has gone and how divided America is now.
That's right. And for the past 10 years, the media has been telling us how bad Trump is, how anti-conservative we should be, and really giving permission to dehumanize anyone on the right. This is what accumulates over 10 years, is kind of the right to bash other people. There used to be a time when I may vote differently than my neighbor, but yet we can still talk to each other. That time has long gone in the United States, and we like to get that back. We like to get the conversations back. So even if you didn't like Charlie Kirk, you don't like what he stands for, it's still time to at least talk to one another, at least treat each other as human beings. I think that is the lesson that we should take away from his death, is that he really tried to reach over to the other side. And, you know, I think both sides has to learn to listen again, because otherwise we're going to keep dehumanizing each other, which then makes a bullet then justified. And that's what we saw last week.
And it's a continuation across the political spectrum. I would say the false narrative, the false accusations of calling people fascist, it does nothing but debase actual fascists in the world.
That's right. And, calling people fascists or Nazis or enemies of the state, enemy of democracy, it almost pushes you to the point for those who are not based in reality that you have to eradicate the problem. And I think that's what brings on the cheering from the left of Charlie Kirk's death, is that they feel that they've eradicated a big problem here in the U.S. and U.S. politics. And I think in their minds, it was justified. I think that's very, very wrong, very, very dark. Murder should never, ever be justified, especially political murder. This was clearly politically motivated. We see that the left doesn't mind that this happens. And, I actually take a little bit of pleasure in seeing that doctors, nurses, and other professionals are getting called out online, sometimes fired, for celebrating a death of a political character. And I think that is really, really just wrong and disgusting. So I don't like the cancellation of anyone, but we should not be celebrating political violence in any form.
And turning to the suspect himself, Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, he has said there's been a DNA match between Tyler Robinson, the gunman, and the gun he used. How significant is this in terms of the case and the public reaction?
Yes, Kash Patel came out pretty quickly after the shooting. I think he said 33 hours to investigate this particular death. It's, still very early days in an investigation like this. I think that, Kash Patel, the FBI, and others wanted to give the public some sort of reassurance that the killer was out of the public. So I understand having a press conference like that, but it's still very, very early in the investigation, just as claimed we have our guy. And there's been a lot of public scrutiny, especially online, about whether or not the FBI does have their guy. And I do wait to see more evidence and a longer investigation before we come to conclusions. But right now, it does seem as though we may have our alleged killer, but he hasn't confessed yet. So that's another thing. And there's going to be a long, drawn out court case due to this. So we're going to find out more as we come.
Moving to TikTok now, President Trump has announced they're close to a deal to bring its control under the US. Do you think this deal protects US national security?
I would imagine if President Trump is involved in this deal, he would require national security to be part of an ongoing deal with TikTok and having operations here in the U.S. Remember, if you were in a U.S. company doing business in China, you would need to have a local partner. You would need to have a Chinese partner involved in that deal. Otherwise, you can't do it. And that is the case with Google, with Facebook, and other social media companies operating in China. President Trump really wants to have TikTok operate here in the U.S., mainly because of what we were speaking about before with Charlie Kirk's TPUSA. It reaches young Americans, and that demographic is very, very valuable to both parties, political parties right now. That is our youth, that is our future. So he wants to not go away with that platform. He wants to embrace it. In fact, he started an account recently on TikTok, and it's a very, very effective social media platform, and it's certainly something that I know my kids are using it. So it would be nice to see that flourish, but flourish in the right way with national security.
Trump famously, he was very critical of TikTok in the past. Why do you think he's changed his tune now?
I think he sees the numbers that TikTok users and what they do and how influential it is here in the United States. It does bring on a much, much younger audience. And that is something that the Republicans have yet to really tap. Charlie Kirk did a fantastic job in delivering the youth vote in 2024. But in order to continue Charlie Kirk's legacy and also to reach younger voters in this generation and in future generations, TikTok is the platform that we need to be embracing. So if security measures are there, I think President Trump would more than happy to expand his social media presence onto TikTok and other platforms that cater to younger and younger audiences. Remember, that is one of the last strongholds the Democrats have. Trump has made inroads with Black men, with Latinos, and with Asian voters. Now he wants to go after the youth voter.
Is the UK's royal welcome for Trump Is it a sign of respect or is it simply a sign of diplomacy by the UK government?
I think it's all of those things. I mean, President Trump and the First Lady really enjoyed their first state visit back in the first Trump administration. It was 3 days of pageantry, and we're about to see exactly the same. We're going to see the royal family and Keir Starmer roll out the red carpets for our president and the First Lady, and there's going to be a great bilateral showmanship of respect and how diplomacy can look. And I think it's a great thing for both countries. Because we do need each other. There's a lot of world wars happening right now, lots of tariffs to discuss, and lots of tech and energy issues that are going to be on the agenda for this state visit. So I think this is a great showing of two countries that always have had a great relationship and always will continue to have a great relationship.
And President Trump and Keir Starmer, they're political opposites. What have you made of their seemingly friendly relationship?
Well, it shows that two sides can work together if they wanted to. And, it's not always a, political tennis match, as the media loves to put it. It's not always right versus left. Sometimes we can work together. And there are lots of things in common here, especially when it comes to trade, when it comes to energy, and when it comes to closing down world wars. And I think that is some of the biggest topics in our news right now. And these are topics that are worth solving and talking about. So these two men will set the examples for both North America and in Europe. And going forward, you can see there's a united front. And that's a very powerful front to show other world leaders, who our allies are. So I think this is a great thing. I think that this is going to be a great showing. We're hearing that there's going to be a carriage ride with the King and President Trump. So I think that's going to be quite exciting. Again, we've seen in the last few weeks military parades. We've seen air shows using our military. We're showing a lot of powerful forces in a soft power way. So I think all of this signals to other world leaders, listen, we're united. We're going to fight if we have to. We'd like to do it via diplomacy and via trade. But yeah, let's try to find a way of working together because we have great allies working with us.
And speaking of Trump's visit, just briefly, after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Trump himself, he was almost assassinated. There's going to be a huge emphasis of security when Trump visits London.
Yes, and this is when political violence has become the norm in the U.S. and hopefully not in other places, but in the U.S. it's become a dominant issue here. The U.S. is slowly becoming radicalized, and where political violence is becoming something that we see all the time and brushed away very quickly. Luckily, with Charlie Kirk's death, his legacy lives on, and we just saw it just recently over the weekend in the U.K., where there were hundreds of thousands of people marching in support of free speech as well as for Charlie Kirk. Ultimately, this is a great sign that security is going to be in the forefront. And I know that President Trump has already asked Congress for an additional $58 million in security, not just for himself, but for his team as well. He realizes that, if you're going to do difficult things, you're going to be a target. So in the UK, he's going to be especially on lockdown. In fact, the first day of his state visit, there's not going to be too many public events at all. So it's going to be quite secure, hopefully. But yes, no, everyone's on high alert here in the US, especially the president.
Do scandals like Peter Mandelson's Epstein ties, do they risk overshadowing the real diplomatic goals of the visit?
Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein continues to haunt politicians, even from the grave. It comes on the heels of President Trump visiting the UK, and President Trump has tried to distance himself from the Epstein files, but he can't even get away from it, even when he crosses the pond. I think it's an agreement that Keir Starmer should have done a better job vetting those he allows to be ambassadors, especially for such an important role as the UK ambassador to the US. I think there's going to be some review of that process. Seems like there was a lot of political kickbacks on this one. So, remember, Lord Mendelson He was supposed to be there to greet President Trump and the First Lady as they came off the plane into the UK this week, and it doesn't look like there's going to be an empty spot for whoever's going to be the next UK ambassador there. So it hasn't gone unnoticed for sure, and I'm sure the UK press will be all over it.
Trump has often said that free speech in the UK is under fire. There's been arrests over tweets, there's been mass rallies. Elon Musk has spoken out on numerous occasions. How is this being viewed from the US, especially by Trump?
Yes, and it was just a few weeks ago that Nigel Farage came to the U.S. Congress for a hearing about this very topic, where there was some concerns that the UK is trying to police the global social media platforms, mainly in what could be said and what has to be removed from online. And remember, it doesn't just pertain within the borders of the UK, but if something is removed, then globally, these comments, posts, content is removed. So there's been some back and forth about it. Is free speech actually free, and who polices that? And I'm of two minds of it. I think that there are some harmful speeches that a lot of it may not be even true, but what jurisdiction does the victim in that case have? And is that something for the UK to protect someone, let's say in Asia? We don't know. So these are big questions for a new set of laws that needs to take place, and these are global laws. And so these are great conversations to have. Our laws are antiquated when it comes to social media. We do need lawmakers who understand this new space that we're all in and how we're all in it together. And new victims are coming around. So this is something that's very sensitive to me, because we see all the times people being bullied on social media. I especially feel for the children who are bullied, and some of them take their lives here. So I do find that although I do enjoy my free speech here in America, I don't like it when it crosses the line into something that offline it would be an offense. It would have been criminal. It would have been criminal charges for whoever perform that offense. So I think those are things that lawmakers both in the UK and around the world should look at to see what new laws are needed for this new social media space that we're all in.
We're just out of time. Angie, Wong, thanks so much for your time. Thanks. That's all we have time for on Global News today. Thanks for watching, and be sure to join us tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, goodbye.